Now live. Hamilton Municipal Heritage Committee for Friday, April 1st, 2022. Sound check. Sound check.
Live.
Okay. Welcome, everyone. I would like to call this meeting of the Hamilton Municipal Heritage Committee to order. Please be advised that our meetings are webcast live by the City of Hamilton and temporarily archived on the city's website. Presentations and reports considered at this meeting are available on the city's website, and members of the public can contact the clerk's office to acquire any documents in an alternative format. Just a reminder to our members and to media that might be watching today, in accordance with the city's procedural bylaw, all heritage-related inquiries should be directed to either the appropriate staff member or to me as chair of the Hamilton Municipal Heritage Committee. Individual members cannot represent the opinion of the committee. Before we begin, there's a couple of items that I would just like to remind our committee members on. It is our role as the advisory committee to the Hamilton City Council that we must act in accordance with not only the provincial legislation, but also the city's policies and codes of conduct. So we shall maintain decorum during our proceedings. We shall act honestly and with integrity. We shall maintain an open and cooperative atmosphere. And although we may differ in opinion, we will be respectful to all. You are reminded that these meetings are being audibly and visually recorded and archived. At any time, the media may quote meeting discussions or member comments without your permission. Please remember that information received by the committee and its working groups is considered confidential and should not be circulated until such time as it has been published by the clerks for public viewing. And finally, when addressing delegations, this is not a time to engage in debate with the delegate, so please ask questions for the purpose of providing clarification only. So as we move into our roll call, I would just ask you to please identify yourself just by calling out Councillor Pearson, David Beeland,
Present.
Janice Brown,
Present.
Karen Burke, Graham Carroll,
Here.
Charles Dimitri,
Present.
Lynn Ludstead,
Present.
Robin McKee, Timothy Ritchie, Will Rosart.
Present.
Thank you, everyone. Madam Clerk, are there any changes to the agenda?
Yes, Madam Chair, we have several changes to today's agenda. Under item 6, delegation requests, Bob Maton, Ancaster Village Heritage, respecting heritage demolition and control for today's meeting. Under 6.3, Miranda Brenton, Infrastructure Ontario, respecting the Hamilton psychiatric lands for today's meeting. Under 6.4, Kathy Stacey, respecting the cultural heritage assessment on the property located at 265 Mill Street, Flamborough, for today's meeting. Under consent, we have item 7.3, Policy and Design Working Group Notes of March 21st, 2022. Under 7.4, the recommendation to remove 8 Wrenwood Place, Flamborough from the Municipal Heritage Register, which is PED 21201C in Ward 15. And additional item 7.5, the Inventory Research Working Group Notes of February 28th, 2022. And under 7.6, the Inventory and Research Working Group Notes of March 18, 2022. Under discussion items, we have item 10.2, which is the Inventory and Research Working Group meeting notes of March 28th, 2022.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. May I now have a mover and a seconder on the motion to approve the agenda as amended?
I see Graham and I see Lynn.
And as we move to the vote, is there anyone opposed to the agenda as amended? Seeing none, that item is carried. Under declarations of interest, are there any declarations of interest today? Seeing none, we will now move on to the approval of our minutes from the previous meeting. We have before us the meeting minutes from February 25th, 2022. May I have a motion to approve the minutes as presented? Unless there's any discussion.
I see Chuck. And a seconder in Lynn.
All right. And as we move to the vote, is there anyone opposed to? That item is carried. Under communication items, item 5.1, we have before us correspondence from Sandy Shaw, MPP of Hamilton West Ancaster, Dundas, to the Honorable Steve Clark, Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, respecting the rescinding of the Minister's zoning order issued for Century Manor. Are there any questions? If not, may I have a motion just to receive this letter?
Will.
Janice, did you have a question?
No, I
No,
was
just to-
moving to receive.
And Will, did you have a question? We heard you.
No, I
Just
want to
to-
move it.
Second? Okay, sounds good. And as we move to the vote, is there anyone opposed to receive? Seeing none, that item is carried. Our next item is delegation requests. So we have before us item 6.1 to 6.4, our list of delegates. Are there any questions? If not, may I have a mover and a seconder to approve our delegation list as presented?
I see Graham and I see David.
And we will now vote. Is there anyone opposed? Being none, that item is carried. So the delegates approved for today's meeting will be asked to speak later in the meeting. Consent items. Item 7.1 is our Heritage Permit Review Subcommittee minutes from February 25th, 2022. If there is no discussion, may I have a motion to receive this item?
I see Lynn as a mover. I need a seconder, and Chuck.
And we will now vote. Is there anyone opposed to receiving? Seeing none, that item is carried. Item 7.2 is the Heritage Permit Application Delegated Approvals. So we have item 7.2A, B, C, and D. Is there any questions or discussion in regards to any of those items? If not, may I have a mover and a seconder to receive?
I see Janice and I see Chuck.
Thank you. And we will now vote. Is there anyone opposed to receiving those items? Seeing none, that item is carried. Item 7.3 is our Policy and Design Working Group notes for March 21st, 2022. If there's no discussion, may I have a motion to receive?
I have
Graham?
discussion.
Okay.
There's a major typo on there, I hope,
Where are you? Okay.
in the meeting, the Heritage Design. So the Heritage Impact Assessment for 16 Stephen Street. It says they're going to demolish 436 King Street, which is St. Patrick's Church. So I'm assuming that it should say King William Street. At least I'm hoping that it's King William Street.
That's a big typo. Yes.
That's a huge typo.
Could staff just confirm?
Hi, yes, through the chair, it is King William Street, yes.
Okay.
So we'll make that adjustment. And with that amendment, is there any other questions? If not, may I have a motion to receive?
I see Graham and I see David.
Thank you. And we will now vote. Is there anyone opposed? Seeing none, that item is carried. 7.4 is our recommendation to remove 8 Printwood Place, Flamborough from the Municipal Heritage Register, PED 21201C in Ward 15. Is there any discussion on that item? If not, may I have a motion to receive?
I see Tim and I see Chuck.
So, sorry, I don't
do you
mean
have
to
a question?
interrupt, but can I ask a question instead through the chair?
Absolutely. Go ahead, Chuck.
Is there any background to why the committee would remove this? Is there any details that staff can provide or other members of the committee?
Alyssa, are you able to speak to that? Yeah.
Yeah, through the chair, Alyssa Golden, Heritage Project Specialist with Tourism and Culture. So this was one of the register objections we received from owners following the batch listing as a part of the Waterdown Inventory project. Unfortunately, it was received shortly after we had already prepared our staff report, which this committee received at its last meeting with the other objections that we had been given notice of. This particular property was identified as character supporting as a part of the inventory. However, we weren't actually able to get a good look at the property from the public right-of-way. It's quite shielded from by trees. And part of the interest in the property was its location. It's a circa 1950 property that's within a more modern subdivision area within the sort of outskirts, the southeast corner of the historic village. So it's not on any of the heritage landscapes or heritage streetscapes within the village. It's outside of that context, but really we couldn't quite see whether there was any physical value to the property. After receiving the objection from the owner, we were provided with photo documentation and confirmed that there was no physical heritage value or interest left for the property. And that's why we're recommending to remove the property in result of the owner's objection to listing.
Thank you, Alyssa, and thank you, Madam Chair.
No problem. Is there any further questions about that one? If not, may I have the motion to receive?
I had Tim Ritchie as the mover of it, and I'll take Lynn as the seconder.
And as we vote, is there anyone opposed? Seeing none, that item is carried. We now move on to our staff presentations. Item 8. Oh,
No.
sorry. Oh,
My apologies.
oh, yes, that's right. We have
7.5 and 7.6.
6.
If the committee wishes, they can approve them together. There are no recommendations from the working group in these notes.
Bouncing back here. Okay. Is there any discussion? So 7.4.
No, 5.
Yes, 7.5 and 7.6. Which is the Inventory and Research Working Group notes of February 28th. And item 7.6 is Inventory and Research Working Group notes of March 18.
Is there any discussion in regards to those items or questions? Seeing none, may I have a mover and a seconder to receive?
I see Janice and I see David.
And as we move to vote, is there anyone opposed? Seeing none, those items are carried. Thank you, Madam Clerk. And so we move on to our staff presentations, 8.1, Demolition Control and Heritage. So Alyssa Golden, our Heritage Project Specialist, is here with a presentation for us. Welcome, Alyssa.
Thank you, Chair. Just going to pull up my presentation. Just one sec. And hopefully you are all looking at my slide.
Yes, we are.
Thank you so much. Okay, so thank you, Madam Chair. I'm here today to present to the Heritage Committee on the topic of demolition control and heritage. And just some background on why I'm here in front of you today. This was the result of a delegation provided by the Ancaster Village Heritage Community. I'd like to thank Bob is here today as well on behalf of that organization and may speak and have additional questions following my presentation. But they presented a delegation to Planning Committee back in 2020, which was then referred to this Municipal Heritage Committee for conversation, which ultimately resulted in a direction to our general manager to take a look at our existing demolition control policies and to potentially address some of the concerns that were raised by the delegation and to report back to this committee. So that's why I'm here in front of you today. And staff did also meet with the Ancaster Village Heritage Community directly after this item was referred to our general manager. We formed a interdepartmental working group of staff to address the delegation, including folks in heritage planning, building, planning, municipal law enforcement, and legal. So I'd like to thank all those staff for their assistance as a part of this project. Unfortunately, we had to put our project on hold back in 2021 due to some of our redeployments, but we are now picking it back up, presenting to you today. And staff did reconnect with the folks from the Ancaster Village Heritage Community Group just last February, just last month, to give them an update. And they have been also presented the information you're going to hear today. So an overview of the presentation, what I'm going to speak about. I'm going to start with what we heard from the delegation. I'll give some clarification around demolition control, discuss some of the best practices we learned through our review, give an overview of our observations, identify some key themes for addressing the concerns and issues raised in the delegation, and then talk about our next steps. So as you might recall, it was quite a substantial package provided by the Ancaster Group. I'll just highlight here their main delegation request within the package. to revise the demolition control bylaw to require all building permits to demolish buildings more than 90 years old to be considered by council and allow for public consideration and improve language around what are quote unquote routine applications in the bylaw. We did have a follow-up meeting with Bob and Jim from the Ancaster Village Heritage Community Group to get some better understanding of what their concerns are and how we might be able to address them. They did indicate that the 90-year-old buildings was just a suggestion, and really they were open to other options to ensure that unprotected properties of heritage interest are reviewed. They wanted to see the ones that matter get to council, not necessarily looking to overload staff and council with these types of applications. And I think most importantly, wanted to remove some of the subjectivity around interpreting what were quote unquote routine applications with the existing bylaw. So I know for most of you, this might be new information. You don't really deal with demolition control applications. So I just wanted to provide some clarification around what demolition control is. It is enabled under Section 33 of the Planning Act, and it prevents demolition without applying to council and receiving approval. However, this demolition control only relates to what is defined as residential property under the Planning Act. And this refers to a building that contains one or more dwelling units that are used or designed for use. Council can only delegate its authority to issue or approve demolition control permits to staff. It can't delegate the authority to refuse them. Demolition control is not a public process. Only the owner can appeal a decision of council related to a demolition control application. Undelegated or not, a demolition control application cannot be denied when a building permit for a new replacement building has been approved and where all those requirements have been met. And that's a key takeaway there. And also the inferred intent of demolition control under the Planning Act is the retention of housing stock or dwelling units. And I just wanted to put the presentation, put the definitions up for this presentation in case you needed to refer back to them in terms of the Planning Act definitions of a dwelling unit as well as residential property. Happy to answer any questions you might have afterwards about that. So in addition to looking at our own process, we also did a scan of some of the best practices across Ontario with similarly sized municipalities. Like Hamilton, other municipalities rely on the applicant to identify the residential use or the presence of dwelling units that trigger demolition control applications. Many municipalities also identified a broader intent to their bylaws, including the related benefits of maintaining the integrity of residential neighborhoods, preventing the premature loss of dwelling units and the creation of vacant land, retaining existing dwelling units until new uses have been considered, and preventing the premature loss of municipal assessment. Now, some municipalities did and have in the past circulated their demolition permits to their Heritage Committee for review and information. Many municipalities identified this as being a challenging process in terms of the legislative timelines and also setting unrealistic expectations for the Heritage Committee members, as this is not a public process and they cannot actually intervene and appeal a decision related to a demolition control permit. So now I'll just go over a summary of our observations around this review, and this is based on our internal and our best practice review around demolition control, as well as how it relates to heritage conservation. Really, the Ontario Heritage Act is the primary tool for managing and conserving our heritage resources by listing properties of interest on our register and protecting significant heritage properties through designation. And public participation in heritage conservation is most appropriately accomplished through the city's existing built heritage inventory strategy and not through the existing demolition control process. Demolition control is not a heritage conservation tool. It's not regulated by the Ontario Heritage Act. However, the Heritage Act is applicable law for building permits to demolish, whether they're properties listed on the register or designated under the Act. And we should ensure that the demolition control process aligns with our other city policies and process. Consultation with our Heritage Committee on the demolition of properties listed on the register should be accomplished through a standardized register demolition process and not necessarily through the demolition control process. The premature demolition of residential property, whether it's heritage or not, could be prevented by ensuring that new uses are considered through Planning Act applications before a demolition control permit is issued. I'll touch on that again in a second. And the review of Planning Act applications also allows for the assessment of potential heritage value or interest and the impact of the identified value as a part of those processes. And then finally, transparency in the demolition process can be improved by redefining the scope of demolition control applications that can be approved through staff's delegated authority. So after coming to these observations and conclusions, we identified 4 key themes related to actions moving forward to address the concerns that were originally raised through the Ancaster Village Heritage Community Group's delegation. These include continuing the proactive identification of our heritage properties through the Built Heritage Inventory Strategy, updating the demolition control area bylaw, standardizing the registered demolition process, and improving internal processes and communication. And I'll just provide a high-level overview of each of these themes. So as our Heritage Committee members are well aware, the city's Built Heritage Inventory Strategy is an initiative to proactively list properties of heritage interest on our register and to designate significant heritage properties under the Heritage Act. And as you know, designated properties are subject to heritage permits, which is applicable law for all building permits to demolish, and a council decision is required on all applications to demolish heritage properties. And as well, properties listed on the register have interim 60-day protection from demolition, and that's intended to allow staff and council time to discuss alternatives to demolition with an owner and, where warranted, issue a notice of intention to designate if a significant property might be under threat of demolition to void all active permits. And staff did recently update this committee on our Built Heritage Strategy work plan, including short, medium, and longer term priorities to continue this inventory work across the city. And just recognizing that the delegates are from the community of Ancaster, just showing a close-up here of our short, medium, and longer term priorities for inventory work. The shorter term being in red, including the historic settlement areas of Ancaster Village, Jerseyville, and Linden. The more medium term shown in blue, and longer term in green. And in addition to our city-led work, the strategy also encourages collaboration and the empowerment of community groups to conduct their own proactive heritage inventory work and identify heritage buildings. And in 2020, the members of the Ancaster Village Heritage Community Group coordinated with the Hamilton branch of the Architectural Conservancy of Ontario to conduct an inventory of pre-Confederation buildings in Ancaster. They reviewed approximately 100 pre-Confederation buildings, and this review addressed almost half of all the remaining inventory listings in Ancaster and led to a good chunk of them being listed on the register and a small handful of significant heritage buildings also being added to the designation work plan. And there may be opportunities to coordinate on additional community-led inventory work to address the remaining listings and historic settlement areas. On to the next theme of actually updating our demolition control bylaw. So based on our review and some of the best practices, what's being proposed is to update our demolition control area bylaw in a manner that would both retain the efficiencies of delegated authority and provide appropriate consideration for residential property prior to demolition. Updates would include clarifying the intent of the bylaw to not only retain dwelling units, but also address some of those other items that I mentioned earlier in terms of maintaining the integrity of residential neighborhoods, preventing premature loss of dwelling units, retaining existing dwelling units until new uses have been considered, and preventing the premature loss of municipal assessment. We'd also look to ensure that the definitions in the bylaw are consistent with the Planning Act definitions. And I think most substantially and importantly is redefine the scope of the delegated authority for approval of demolition control applications, including delegating where we have permissions for replacement buildings or where new uses have been considered and granted. And all other undelegated applications would then be considered at council, which would improve the transparency of the overall process. And just to give you an idea of what that would look like, here's the language of our existing demolition control bylaw in terms of the types of applications that can be delegated to staff for approval or issuance. And the first two relate to very standard types of applications where you have an application or building permit for new construction that's already been approved, or where you have some form of development application approved, whether that's site plan or draft plan of subdivision. But really, it's these last four categories that were identified as no longer being necessary or considered to be routine types of applications that we would want delegated. And by removing these four categories, the intended impact is to prevent the premature demolition of residential property by ensuring that replacement buildings have been approved or that appropriate development approvals are in place before demolition is issued. Our third theme is around addressing the Heritage Register process. As this committee knows, the Heritage Act requires owners of non-designated properties listed on the register to provide 60 days notice to council of their intention to demolish or remove any building or structure. The city, however, does not currently have a standard process for receiving these types of notices. However, staff will be developing a standard process for receiving owners' notice of intention to demolish as a part of the ongoing heritage process review. And this will also take into account the recent Bill 108 changes to the Act approved last year. This would help define a process by which Heritage Committee and Council are made aware of notices of intention to demolish submitted by owners. And then finally, in terms of themes and actions to take to address this delegation, would be improving our internal processes and communication around some of these other changes, and really addressing that early notification is key, notification to heritage planning staff to be able to identify any heritage interests or any actions that might need to be taken. And as well, there's some opportunities for integration within our existing city database system to potentially automate these types of notices. So in terms of next steps, we'll be looking to bring forward the recommended changes to the demolition control area bylaw. And this will be put into a staff report, hopefully to our planning committee, scheduled for April 25th. And following that also, as I mentioned, obviously the changes to the heritage process review would address the register demolition process as well. And I just want to say thanks again to all my colleagues who I could not have done this without, in terms of all of the knowledge within building, municipal law enforcement, legal, growth management. Really, this bylaw and the discussion around demolition control impacts so many factors across the city. So I want to thank everyone for collaborating and working closely on this. And that's the end of my presentation.
Thank you, Alyssa. That is excellent work. That's fantastic. Is there any questions from our members to Alyssa? Maybe we can start a speakers list. I see Janice's hand up there first. Are there any other questions? Well, Janice, go ahead.
Through the chair to Alyssa, I'm at Demolition Control Area Bylaw Updates. Undelegated applications considered at council. Could you give me an example of what would be an undelegated application?
Sure, through the chair. Right now, in terms of how the bylaw sits, maybe I can pull that slide up to just show you. Just one sec. Share that, hopefully. Oh. So if everyone can see that on their screen.
Yeah, this is what, yeah.
Yeah, so these are the types of applications currently that can be delegated to staff for approval. So anything that wouldn't fall within this category currently would have to go to council. So probably a really good example of that, there's situations now where you might have a vacant building that might have been subject to fire or something else, and is considered safe. It's been boarded up and it's sound, so there's no unsafe issue. That kind of building right now wouldn't be able to be demolished unless someone had an approved permit for a new building to replace it. And sometimes that can be challenging around insurance. That's probably one of the best examples I can think of that right now would typically go to council for approval to be demolished outside of an approved permit for new construction.
Thank you. That helps. And it would, yeah.
And sorry, and then just moving forward, obviously there'd be a potential increase to the number of applications that would be undelegated, would not be able to be processed by staff and would go to council. And the idea is those types of applications that could have been delegated previously will now be more transparent because they will need to go to council.
Okay. And one other question, if no one else has a question, I don't know what the speakers list looks like right now.
Go ahead, Janice, and then
Oh.
I have Chuck as the
Okay,
second.
it's just a quick one, and it's a historical question. At one time, way back, I think in the 70s, we did have demolition control. How does our demolition control differ then and now? And I know that's a long span, but it's not as though it's a new process. Thank you, and that's my last question.
Yeah, through the chair. So I would say there hasn't really been changes for at least a couple of decades, but the demolition control area bylaw that you're referring to pre-amalgamation from Hamilton, my understanding is at the time of amalgamation, a new bylaw was formed at that time, and there's been some amendments to that over the years, probably the most substantial being the original delegation for approval under the Planning Act. So that's something where there were some efficiencies that were seen in terms of being able to provide delegated approval for these types of applications and not having them go straight to council in all situations. That would probably be the most substantial change over the last few decades, but generally the intent and the purpose has stayed the same.
Thank you.
Chuck, you're next on our speakers list if you'd like to ask a question.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. My question is about some of the definitions around routine and non-routine, I suppose, and it's based on what we've seen in the Heritage Permit Review Subcommittee meeting. The question specifically was, is there any consideration for cases where there's multiple buildings or structures on one property? And we've had that happen recently, both in denser areas, and then more often the case where it's when a larger property, say out in non-urban areas. And, you know, if there's a demolition, say, of a garage, and the property may or may not, that building may or may not have heritage merit versus other buildings on the property. Can you comment if there's been any consideration for that case with the definition of routine versus non-routine?
Sure, through the chair. So I'm actually going to just bring up the definitions because that might be helpful. So it doesn't necessarily relate to the demolition of an entire building. Demolition control relates to the demolition of dwelling units within a residential property. So in the situations where you might have an accessory building on the same property as a residence, demolition of a garage, for example, a detached garage where there isn't a dwelling unit would not be triggering demolition control, but demolition of the house itself or a component of the house that contains dwelling units would trigger demolition control. So it's not as clear cut. And of course, in terms of different policies relating to each other, sometimes it can be complicated in terms of what is demolition control, what is demolition under the Building Code Act, and what is demolition under the Ontario Heritage Act. And that's another reason why it makes sense to not integrate heritage review into demolition control, because those definitions are different.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions from committee to Alyssa? If not, may I have a motion to receive the presentation?
I see Janice and I see Graham.
Thank you. And as we move to vote, is there anyone opposed? That's great. Thank you again for that presentation, Alyssa. It was excellent. We now move on to our delegate. So we have Bob Meaton from the Ancaster Village Heritage Respecting Heritage Demolition and Control. So we'll move to our delegate. But before we begin, I will remind that the delegate has 5 minutes for their presentation. And I'd also like to remind our members that addressing delegations is not a time to engage in debate. So we're just asking questions to get clarification.
Thank you, Chair.
Well, welcome, Bob.
Thanks. This is great. It's great to be here. And this is really a complicated issue. And for many reasons, as we see, it stretches across the whole breadth of the planning in the city. So I want to thank Alyssa in particular for helping us to understand this. Took a lot of study and a lot of help from Alyssa for us to get a grip on it. And I think I speak for our membership and for Ancaster in general when I say thank you to city staff, the HMHC, the Planning Committee, and to Jason Thorne and Alyssa Golden, in particular for their efforts to address our concerns about the progressive losses of heritage buildings, both in Ancaster and around the city. Once gone, these precious buildings cannot be recovered. They are at the root of our identity as a community. And this explains the consternation, upset, and anger in Ancaster when the 1860 Brandon House was demolished exactly 2 years ago now. And added to that is the quiet demolition of the 1840 Mar House, which until recently stood beside the stone-built Mar Philippou House, still on the lot at Academy and Wilson Streets. It also explains the increased vigilance that our residents are exerting to preserve our heritage in Ancaster and why we do battle to stop developers from turning our town into a miniature version of Toronto. The Ancaster Wilson Street secondary plan requires all development within a few blocks of Ancaster Village to conform to a heritage architectural style, and we support that provision fully. Current development proposals completely ignore that requirement, along with many other provisions in the bylaw. And I would just refer you to my opinion piece in the spec, which is published today. On this briefing done by Alyssa Golden, I think it's an excellent review of the current demolition bylaw and how it can be improved to protect valued and important buildings in the city. First, the proactive strategy to encourage public participation in inventories of heritage buildings is an excellent idea. 20 volunteers in Ancaster inventoried 110 pre-Confederation buildings in 2020, backed up by experts Alyssa Golden from the city and Shannon Cowles from the Archaeological Conservancy of Ontario, and it worked very well. Next, we hope to inventory buildings dating later than 1867 this coming summer, with a view to also placing them on the municipal register. This will give them 60 days protection from demolition, and from there to be considered for designation. On strengthening the language around routine applications, the definition of a dwelling unit needs stricter interpretation. A dwelling unit means a property that is used or designed for use as a domestic establishment. The Brandon House was built as a dwelling unit and had always been a dwelling unit, yet as I understand it, was demolished so precipitately as a commercial operation because of zoning, which would appear to be a misapplication of the bylaw. I'm not sure about the 1840 Mar House, but as far as we know, it was never considered by the city as a dwelling unit. Like the Brandon House, the Mar House just disappeared one day from the streetscape on Wilson Street. It was a sad loss. In neither case had a building permit been issued for new construction. On intent, in Waterloo's demolition policy, it is expressly stated that the demolition control bylaw allows or enables the city to manage the demolition of residential units and maintain the integrity of neighborhoods. It also prevents parcels of land from becoming vacant for long periods of time before new uses have been considered and constructed. Both are issues in Ancaster. We need such a statement of intent. It might change the way that demolitions are thought of and considered in the approval process. I believe you also need to consider requiring plans for new construction to be submitted to the city before demolition of a historic building is permitted, whether it is on the register or not, and that the demolition be considered as an integral part of the building application. This would fulfill the Waterloo intent to prevent lots from becoming vacant for long periods, while also ensuring that the building to be demolished would not provide dwelling units itself. The definition of what is historic would have to be worked on. We have suggested special notice be taken of buildings over 90 years of age, but we note that certainly if measures to improve communication between divisions via internal notifications is to happen at all, then some way of identifying what buildings are to be red flagged needs to be developed, and that would most simply rely on the age of the building. Thanks once again for listening to us. It's really exciting to see this today and for your efforts to help preserve our heritage. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bob, and thank you for all of the work that the group is doing and the partnerships that you've been making. It really is excellent to see what is happening and how it's working to benefit the community for years to come. So, do we have any questions for our delegate?
Just a comment through the chair. Congratulations, Bob. Great work.
Thanks, Janice.
Is there any other speakers? Oh, go ahead, Chuck.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Bob, for that presentation. I never thought of that case that you were describing until you went through it in your presentation, specifically about how properties over time convert from being a so-called residence to a commercial property. Do you know in Ancaster if there's any others that are similar to that? That have gone through that process, and just based on the study, the inventories that your group has done in the last little while.
Yes, there are a couple of buildings on the west side of Wilson Street, 129 Wilson West, I think, and building beside it, both of which are now commercial and were built in the early 1800s. And we know that developers have either bought them or are very interested in buying them. So really concerned about both of those. They're set a little bit back. One's covered by a tree. There's a large tree out in front, so it's not very visible. And apart from our own research, probably wouldn't have come to the attention of Ancaster residents. But we are concerned about those buildings, and I can't think of any others on Wilson Street at the moment, but there are others.
Thank you.
So we're hoping that this will make a change in the way that these buildings are approached, and there'll be a little more thought given to what happens to them and whether they can be converted to dwelling units. I know there's intensification policies in place, whether they would be subject to intensification while preserving the building, perhaps adding on that kind of thing. But I think preservation of the historic parts of Ancaster is really important. We're working hard on that.
Tim, go ahead.
Thank you through the chair. Good question, Bob. I don't know if you hear me too well, but
can hear you, Tim.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Thanks. I noticed that it was very helpful staff, and I was just wondering if you could mention how much help or assistance you've had from political levels at municipal, provincial, or federal levels for your cause here for the thing, because I feel that's really where the buck's going to stop with things like these MZOs and the changes to the Planning Act that's coming. So I was wondering if there's been a lot of political will that has backed you up. Thank you.
Well, I think the indications are that there has been. We haven't had a lot of direct contact with Councillor Ferguson, but we know that things have gone very smoothly with staff, and I'm sure that there's there's influence there that he's exerted to allow that and encourage it. So at provincial level, we haven't had any contact with anybody there, federally either. But our contact really has been through staff, through Jason Thorne, Steve Robichaud at the upper levels, and Alyssa, and Miranda and others who have been more than collaborative with us. It's really it's really quite exciting to see what's been happening. When we've asked questions, there's been a quick response. There's enthusiasm for what we're doing among the staff, and we're really appreciative of that. Does that answer your question, Tim?
And is there any other questions for Bob? If not, thank you, Bob, for that delegation. We really do appreciate it. And may I now have a motion to receive the delegation?
I see Graham and I see Tim.
And as we vote, is there anyone opposed? Seeing none, that item is carried. Thank you, everyone. And we look forward to hearing the next steps. As we move on to our next item, 8.2, we have Chloe Richer is here to give the next presentation. So 8.2 is the Heritage Permit Application, HP 2021-038 under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act for a replacement front door and side light windows and wood profile related to repairs and conservation of transom window and retroactive approval of replacement windows at 24 Griffin Street, Flamborough. Part 4 designation PED 22072, Ward 15. Welcome, Chloe.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will just pull up my presentation. Okay, I presume everyone can see this. Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the Hamilton Municipal Heritage Committee. I'm Chloe Richer, Cultural Heritage Planner with Heritage and Urban Design. Thank you for your attention as I present to you regarding Heritage Permit Application HP 2021-038 for a Part 4 designated property at 24 Griffin Street, Flamborough in Ward 15. And this slide is simply an image of the dwelling on site, the Griffin Stone Cottage. Here you can see the location of the Part 4 designated property on Griffin Street near Mill Street South. The scope of work of this heritage permit application is to install a replacement front door and side lights. The frame and side lights will match what is existing. The new door will be a custom wood door with a proposed new style of 4 panels instead of the existing 6-panel door. The previous submission included a retroactive application for replacement windows. There are no changes with this revised submission. The Heritage Permit Review Subcommittee moved a motion recommending approval of the windows in August 2021. The reason for the work is the poor condition of the existing door. And documentation submitted with the application includes a revised application report with a sketch of the proposed new door and images of other 4-panel doors and an estimate from Steeltown Vintage Carpenter. Following this Hamilton Municipal Heritage Committee meeting, the next steps are for the subject application to be considered by Planning Committee and Council for final approval due to the magnitude of the proposed changes to the built heritage resource, the replacement of windows prior to heritage permit approval, and the proposed replacement of the existing front door. On this slide, I've included an excerpt from the designation bylaw indicating relevant features noted under reason for designation. Previously, in 2018, the heritage permit application had been approved for the restoration and repair of front wall door and windows. The scope of work included the removal of 1 window on the rear elevation and conversion to a doorway and repairs on the front entrance door. So as noted, this current application is a revised submission following feedback from the Heritage Permit Review Subcommittee received on August 17th, 2021. The next 2 slides include photographs and notes from the homeowners indicating the existing condition of front entrance and details on the scope of work. In addition to further photos and notes, here's a sketch of the proposed new 4-panel oak door. The property owners have also provided images of other properties with 4-panel doors. In considering the revised submission, I conducted research on Regency Doors and found the following quote from the Ancestral Roof, Domestic Architecture of Upper Canada, indicating that the door of a Regency dwelling is not its most significant feature. I also found examples of doors with 4, 6, and even 8 panels in some cases. So as such, staff are not opposed to the change from a 6-panel to a 4-panel door. The property owners incorporated feedback into their revised design and made efforts to ensure the new door will be a custom wood door. At their meeting on February 15th, 2022, the Heritage Permit Review Subcommittee reviewed the application. The subcommittee recommended that the application be approved with the following 2 standard conditions: that any minor changes to the plans and elevations following approval shall be submitted to the satisfaction and approval of the Director of Planning and Chief Planner prior to submission as part of any application for a building permit and or commencement of any alterations, and that installation of the alterations in accordance with this approval shall be completed no later than February 28, 2024. If the alterations are not completed by then this approval expires as of that date, and no alteration shall be undertaken without new approval issued by the city. Thank you, members, for your time. I now welcome any questions.
So I see Lynn and Chuck. Do we have any other members we should add to our speakers list? Go ahead, Lynn.
Okay, thank you through the chair. I'm just not sure why this is being brought forward if it's been approved by the Heritage Planning Review Subcommittee. What is it? Why is this different?
So it's really the magnitude of the changes with the windows, my apologies through the chair, with the windows all having been replaced as well as the door in combination of all of these alterations. It was felt that it would be best to go to the Hamilton Municipal Heritage Committee and then Planning Committee and Council for the final approval.
Thank you.
Chuck, you're next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I was going to ask the same question as Lynn, so she beat me to that one. Having said all that, maybe I can offer a comment. So I want to echo what Chloe said, because we don't usually have this chance too often because we don't really review them after the Heritage Permit Review Subcommittee. The Permit Review Subcommittee, as Chloe mentioned, reviewed this twice. The couple that's recently a couple of years ago, bought this property, has done an amazing job in maintaining the property, and it's such a beautiful, beautiful cottage in Flamborough. And you know, we were very happy with the work that they did in between the 2 sessions, even to investigate repairing the door and then having come back to us with the second approach. So I would fully echo staff's recommendation here, if not on behalf of the permit review subcommittee. I believe it was unanimous, the discussion we had, but this was a property that we reviewed extensively and in the permit review subcommittee, and approved the permit. That's it.
Are there any other questions or comments? And Chloe, just to clarify, under the recommendation, recommendation 4 is that it be added to staff's work plan?
Through you, Madam Chair. So the designation bylaw would need to be updated. it is an older bylaw, and some of the features which are identified under reason for designation will no longer be there. So the windows, as mentioned, have already been removed, but the wording of the door itself does specifically mention the original 6-panel door. So we do have a plan to update that designation bylaw. We're looking at doing so following completion of the alterations, just to ensure that everything has taken place and that there is that requirement to update the bylaw.
Sounds good. Any other questions? If not, may I have a mover and a seconder to receive the presentation?
Madam Chair, I believe that Janice might have had a question.
Through the chair, it wasn't a question; it was a comment. Having read this report, and I would just like to commend the owners on their investigative work and the excellent folks that they, as Chuck said, the excellent folks that they consulted, and the two companies that they worked with in order to get these windows and doors. I'm very familiar with both, and I think this is a terrific solution to windows that were beyond repair. Thank you.
Thank you, Janice. So we have a mover and a seconder. Is there anyone opposed to receiving?
Through the chair, if I may ask your indulgence to remind me who the mover and seconder are, please.
David and Lynn. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
And there was no one opposed, so that item is carried. Chloe, thank you for all of that and getting that report prepared and working with the property owner.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
We now move on to the report. So we have before us the recommendation, and I'll just briefly read that the Heritage Permit Application HP 2021-038 for replacement of the front door and side light windows and wood profile, related repairs and conservation of the front transom window, and retroactive approval of replacement windows for the lands located at 24 Griffin Street be approved, subject to the following conditions that Chloe had presented to us. Is there any questions in regards to that report? If not, may I have a mover and a seconder to approve the report and the recommendations?
I see Tim and I see Graham.
And as we move to vote, is there anyone opposed? Seeing none, that item is carried. Thank you, everyone. And we now move on to our public hearings and delegations. So please welcome our next delegation, Miranda Brenton from Infrastructure Ontario. I'd also like to, again, remind our members that during this time, it's not a time of debate, but to ask questions for clarification. Welcome, Miranda.
Everyone can see me, but no one can hear me, except for now. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much. Through the chair, just to let everyone know, I'm here on behalf of a request from Stacy to talk about the heritage evaluation process that we have at Infrastructure Ontario. So I don't have a presentation, so this is going to be a bit more kind of a conversational piece. So we're going to first talk a little bit about kind of the areas that everyone here is very much used to. So underneath the Ontario Heritage Act, you're very familiar with, Part 4, which includes the municipal register, designation by the municipality, easements to the municipality, as well as Part 5, which is the HCDs that we all know and love. And you probably dabble a little bit in Part 6, which is related to archaeological work. Now, being at Infrastructure Ontario, which is a prescribed public body, or any of our parent ministries or ministries themselves, we are related to Part 3 of the Ontario Heritage Act, and specifically through that, we refer to something called the Standards and Guidelines for Provincial Heritage Property. And this is our framework for both evaluation, maintenance, and monitoring of our properties. Through that, we have a similar process for identification as you do for doing your sort of designations under Part 5 of the Act. So we do a similar evaluation, but in addition to a 906 evaluation, we also do a 1006 evaluation to look at the value of a property from a provincial heritage level. In order to do that, we do that through cultural heritage evaluation reports, where we run through and we do the analysis, and then we have a committee at IO with MDCS to review and then approve the Statement of Cultural Heritage Value. Through that, once we've established and determined the heritage value of a property, it could be at the level of something we call a PHP, which is related to a provincial heritage property, and that refers to properties that have significance at a local level. And then we also have something which we lovingly refer to as a PHPPS, and that's a provincial heritage property of provincial significance. And this relates to properties that are determined to be significant at provincial level, which basically boils down to it meets the categories under 1006, where a PHP will check off boxes for properties that are known to meet the category under the 906 evaluation. Once we have this established, we take this information and we take the associated Statement of Cultural Heritage Value that we create and approve internally, and then we write something called a Strategic Conservation Plan. Now, the name itself is a little bit misleading. This is actually mostly a heritage management plan for properties. So it talks about ongoing management, use, if there's proposed any changes, if there's a proposed disposition of the property. For example, if we're going to sort of sell it out of provincial ownership, what that will look like, and any sort of monitorings and ongoing works associated with that. So that's pretty simple. And the reason why we're talking to you about this, as part of our evaluation work and our framework, we actually come to different stakeholders. So we do internal ministry stakeholders, and we also can come to municipalities as well as interest groups. So in this case, when we were speaking to Stacey, we were talking about a particular property, so the Hamilton Psychiatric property, and Stacey and heritage planners generally are conduits to sort of speaking with the city and with the Hamilton Municipal Heritage Committee. So, as I said earlier, upon Stacey's request, I just wanted to provide a quick overview of our framework for which we proceed to do our heritage evaluations, as well as our subsequent documentations that look at the monitoring and maintenance of properties. We should note too that as part of our evaluations, we actually do hire external consultants to write reports. So similar to what City of Hamilton does for their or designations, where you'll hire an external consultant to assist with the report writing. So we do the same for that. So we have retained an external consultant, Stephen Burgess Architects, for both our heritage reporting as well as our strategic conservation plan.
Thank you for that, Miranda. I guess we'll open the floor. If we can start a speakers list, is there anyone that has questions or wants to make a comment? So we'll start with Janice. Is there anyone else? We'll get those hands up. Okay, go ahead, Janice.
Yes, through the chair. Miranda, you talked about Regulation 1006 and the criteria. What is that criteria? I'm totally unfamiliar with that regulation.
So it's sort of set up similarly to the 906 regulation, but it's a bunch of sort of criteria and standards that relate to provincial heritage significance. So it can walk through significance as it relates to the province, significance as it relates to kind of building up, so historical significance, ongoing significance, and so forth. If you look up the regulation itself, it does a good kind of walkthrough. So similar if you do the 906 regulation, the 1006. And that's something I'm sure possibly Stacey, if you could circulate to the Heritage Committee, that would actually be something that might be of interest for this.
Thank you, Miranda. Through the chair, that would be appreciative if Stacey could do that for us.
Yep, of course.
Do we have any other member questions? Maybe a good time for discussion specifically about the psychiatric lands. Miranda, do you have any more of an update that you can share with?
Yep. So part of what we're doing here is it's part of our consultation piece. So as I mentioned, Stacey asked us for me to come and sort of do a brief overview of the process, understanding that it is a little bit different from what sort of goes on in the municipality level, but we do sort of have similar strains of what we're doing. And as part of creating the strategic conservation plan, we are looking for input from different stakeholders. So in this case, coming to the City of Hamilton, through our conduit, which is Stacy, to see if you have any input or suggestions or thoughts on strategic conservation plan, and if there's any input you would like to provide.
So is this, what is your timing like? Is this something that we can take back to, say, one of our working groups, inventory and research or policy and design, or what is your timing to get feedback so you can move on to your next steps?
So currently our timing is looking for the month of April.
To gather all your feedback?
Yeah, so it's sort of open consultation, sort of similar to with other consultations that are, you know, generally around 30 days. That's what we're aiming for this.
Go ahead, Janice.
Yes, through the chair to Miranda. This is the first I've heard about consultations, but that means nothing. Is there a specific letter that you've sent out, a form? Have you sent it out to those groups that we know are actively opposed to the province selling off this and perhaps having it demolished? Has that gone forward to all of these interest groups?
So some of our first steps have been reaching out to the municipality. So we have been in conversations with Stacy over the past few months as we developed our cultural heritage evaluation, as well as sort of as we started to step into our strategic conservation plan phase. So our first step has been with Stacy to sort of establish, you know, what groups would be great to go to and sort of go from there. So we're starting sort of at that point, but we haven't done the official reach out yet.
So, through the chair again, if I could continue on in this line of conversation, since you're just starting and you're asking for this input to be done in April, that seems a little tight for Stacy to get her information out to all of the groups that I'm sure she is very aware of that have a huge interest in what is going on. And it's just not recently. This has been ongoing for many years, as I recall, and I guess it might even go back to 2017. So, is there any hope of this consultation being extended a little further so that there truly can be input from your stakeholders? And the community in Hamilton are huge stakeholders. Thank you.
Through the chair, thanks. Great question, Janice. So Stacy is really our contact for, as it goes to the municipality. We'll likely be reaching out to stakeholder groups ourselves in the near future to sort of establish a time to meet and discuss and so forth.
Through the chair again, if I might continue with this line of question, just one last one. Is it possible, and whether it's Stacy or yourself, could we have a copy of your official statement that says this is what you're going to be doing so that we can perhaps distribute it and let folks know what is actually going on with this particular property?
So Janice, it's not our job to distribute information.
Sorry.
So have to keep the roles separate. Yeah, but I see Ken has turned on his camera. Ken, did you have some comments?
Yes, through the chair, I just wanted to clarify that we have been working with Miranda. We have provided them, the province, with some suggested groups to consult with on this, including this group. So just a bit of context there that's been ongoing. But again, I would see this as mostly a provincial jurisdiction and a provincial study, as opposed to the city's role in searching out in coordinating consultation that way.
Yes, and if I might add through the chair, working with Ken and working with Stacy have been incredibly helpful in assisting me and my consultants put together this information.
So I have a speakers list here. Graham first, and then Chuck to follow. Go ahead, Graham.
Well, it's nice to see you again, Miranda. But I'm going to say this is an awful tight timeline, because if it goes to inventory research, we have to get our meeting notes back up to the Municipal Heritage Committee before they go out to you. I don't see how we can fit that into a 30-day timeline. It doesn't seem quite possible.
Yep. So through the chair, a lot of it too is asking out when I was reaching out to Stacy to sort of give us ideas about how would the city like to provide sort of feedback on this. So I think that's something that might be worthwhile for the city to sort of determine how they would like to provide feedback. So I relate back to sort of Stacy and Ken Coyte's what would be the most appropriate group, if they're happy with sort of providing feedback at a staff level.
Can I see your cameras on again?
Through the chair, we will be doing that from a staff level based on previous council direction. But if the timelines are that short, perhaps there's members of the committee that could speak individually with the province and provide their, reach out to yourself as chair. There's other groups in the community that were suggested that the province could reach out to get comments on if we can't beat the timelines for committee. Because I gather, Miranda, there is not room to extend the deadline.
To the chair, generally no. We're trying to sort of keep it within this 30-day timeframe.
Chuck, you were next on the list. Oh.
And thank you, Madam Chair. A lot of what I wanted to cover was mentioned just in the last dialogue. Before that, though, Miranda, welcome back. By the way, it's great to see alumni from Hamilton and these meetings doing great things. And I'm happy that the province is engaging the city. You know, that's great to hear, you know, especially about such an important property. As Graham said, I'm not sure, given our subcommittees, it's going to be very hard to do something in the next 30 days. But my question relates to that. Do you think there'll be other opportunities to provide input beyond that? Or is there even a process for that? And it's not just for this committee. Janice has hinted at this. There'd be lots of other interest from the community at large, I would think. So
thanks to the chair. So we can definitely sort of keep a bit of a dialogue on the heritage front, absolutely. And we should say too that as IO and as part of this work, we have been listening. So we have been listening to even what the MPP has put out. We've been listening to the different sort of statements that have come through council. We've been listening to the different groups. So we've heard the messaging. We're just still looking for an opportunity to engage a little bit further, but we have definitely not come to this with sort of closed ears. We do understand and have recognized the full background of comments that have been issued so far, and we've taken that into consideration as part of our ongoing work. So this is definitely not coming in with our eyes closed. We have definitely been listening throughout.
Miranda, through the chair.
Go ahead, Will.
I've had some technical difficulties, so I've missed part of it. But my question is, what groups specifically have been notified?
So as of right now, we're still reviewing the groups that Stacey has been provided to us, and then we'll start reaching out probably within next week or so.
With the 30-day scheduling still in place?
Yes, we'll sort of operate around that to look for kind of the best ways that we can consult within that timeline.
Thank you.
So there are a couple of options available to the committee. We can discuss it now and provide comments at this meeting that can go forward. Our working groups can meet at any time, so we can adjust the timeline of when and have maybe a special meeting. And just looking through some notes here, we could look to schedule, if we needed to, a special meeting of Municipal Heritage Committee to deal with any comment approvals that we needed to do. And correct me if I'm wrong, Lorraine, if there's a problem with that.
No, that's according to the terms of reference. The committee can meet. The terms of reference say that meeting minimum of 1 month, one meeting per month. So another meeting could be scheduled later on in the month if the committee wishes to do that.
I saw Tim's excitement in the camera.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Will. So do we have some feedback that we want to provide to Miranda right now during this meeting? Or is this something that...
So if I could say through the chair, I think the best would be to refer back to sort of to Stacey to see how the city would best like to kind of respond to us and sort of kind of do a better sort of coordinated approach through that.
Go ahead, Ken.
Through the chair, Miranda and I will have to have an offline conversation. I was under the impression that this was a provincial-led consultation, and given the timelines, I would think it'd be best that they would present directly to the committee. But Miranda and I can have a quick meeting and we can discuss that and get back to you as the chair in the next couple of days. But if Miranda, unless you are comfortable sharing an overview of the report with the subcommittee and recording their comments, would be the quickest way to do it.
Sure. So through the chair, we can get back to you on that. For right now, the scope of my presentation today was to talk generally about the overall process.
Okay, so I guess there's some questions and some logistics that need to be worked out, some details. So I would maybe, if we can ask staff to let us know how this should all sort of come together, and whether or not we need to plan some tactical meetings this month to be able to respond back in a timely manner. Ken, is that acceptable, Ken?
Yes, I'll try and get
Yeah.
back to you next week. We'll see if we can get an official. Again, the city will be providing comments from a staff perspective. I would expect the committee could provide a response from a community perspective. But Miranda and I will have a further conversation about that.
Yeah, sounds good. And Stacey, you're able to circulate documentation to the members that we need?
Through the chair, we'd look to Miranda to see if she's comfortable with us sharing the study and what degree of consultation she's wanting to share with the committee members.
Yeah, so through the chair, that can be part of our conversation, Ken.
Okay.
Madam Chair?
Go ahead, Will.
Can we schedule a meeting, say 3 weeks hence, so we're in the 30 days? You know, of the committee, tentatively even?
I think we'll let staff. They'll have to look at some times that might be available if we do have to have a meeting. So let's not decide on that just yet. And we know that there's a time frame that has to be met. So we'll get that coordinated and shortly. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Will. All right. Is there any other questions or comments from Miranda? Seeing none, may I have a motion to receive our delegate?
I see Lynn and I see Tim.
And as we vote, is there anyone opposed? Seeing none, that item is carried. Thank you very much, Miranda. It was good to see you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, and hello, everyone.
All right, so that was 9.1, and we now move on to our discussion items. 10.1, it's the Inventory and Research Working Group meeting notes from January 24th, 2022. So there's 2 recommendations from the working group, and so we'll start with the first recommendation. The first recommendation was the Inventory and Research Working Group recommends that 2 Dartnell Road, Bimbrook Feed Station, be added to the Municipal Heritage Register and to the staff work plan for heritage designation under the Ontario Heritage Act as a low priority. So as what's before us, is there any questions or any discussion? If not, may I have a mover and a seconder to approve the recommendation of the working group?
I see David and I see Janice.
And we will now vote. Is there anyone opposed? Seeing none, that item is carried. We'll now move on to our second recommendation, and that is that the Inventory and Research Working Group recommends that 10 Dartnell Road, the Ancaster Co-op, be added to the Municipal Heritage Register. Are there any questions on that property? Seeing none, may I have a mover and a seconder to approve the recommendation of the working group?
I see Graham and I see Tim.
And we will now vote. Is there anyone opposed? Seeing none, that item is carried. Item 10.2 is Inventory and Research Working Group meeting notes of March 28th, 2022. So there is one recommendation in regards to this, and it's that the Inventory and Research Working Group recommends that 265 Mill Street South, Flamborough, Waterdown, be added to the staff work plan for heritage designation under the Ontario Heritage Act. For analysis and supporting documentation, see the recommendation notes below and consult the February 2022 GIA for this property. So we have with us Kathy Stacy, who was a delegate. Kathy, could we just get you to turn on your camera if you can? Oh, is Kathy still on the line, Lorraine?
Yep, and video is on. Her video is on.
Hi, Kathy. We just wanted to clarify. Would you like to make a presentation today, or are you simply asking or answering questions? Oh, you just need to unmute yourself.
On our end, yeah. Kathy, try unplugging and then plugging the headset back in. Sometimes that clears it.
Oh, there you go. It's a volume thing.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yeah, very lightly, but we can hear you.
Okay, I'm not on the speaker anymore. Okay, so I can hear everyone. Everyone can hear me loud and clear?
We can hear you.
Maybe a little bit more loudly.
Okay, I'm going to have to shout then. Okay.
Oh, now I can hear you now.
Okay. Hi, Janice. So,
Hi,
through the
Kathy.
chair, I don't have a presentation per se. I will take questions. I believe there's some questions from the Policy and Design Working Group and the Inventory and Research Working Group. And this is speaking to the property at 265 Mill Street South in Waterdown.
We'll start a speakers list. So we have Janice. Is there anyone else that would like to ask some questions? So there's Lynn. Okay, so go ahead, Janice.
Hi, Kathy. Through the chair, the Inventory and Research Working Group discussed this last Monday, and our recommendation was, as you heard, to add to the staff work plan and to designate this property. We had some concerns in that, first of all, this was the second time that the report came to us, and the first time there were 5 criteria under the Ontario Regulation 906 that were met, and then the second time there were only 2, and you were answering questions partially. And we reviewed the information, and the Inventory Research Working Group really felt that there was definitely design and physical value. We thought that there was good craftsmanship. We thought there was historical associated value because of the Dunnington Grub Gardens, and these are these are very notable landscape architects. And as you know, the Gage Park gardens are designed by them, and that goes back to probably 1925. David Bellin can answer that more than I can at this point. And the other one is the contextual value. It was pointed out that Waterdown Flamborough residents view this as a landmark property, and it is a very, very old building, 1846. The stone we felt was probably quarried from somewhere in the area, and an amazing large structure to be built in 1846. So if you could perhaps explain how you arrived at 2 out of 9, and we arrived at many more than 2 out of 9. Thanks, Kathy.
Okay, so through the chair, and thank you for your comments there, Janice. So what I would like to say is back this up a little bit and talk about where we are in terms of this development application. I'm not sure if everyone's aware, but that the property owners have submitted a zoning bylaw amendment to rezone the property. It includes the retention of the existing stone building and the existing carriage house garage on the property to be incorporated into the new development. The new development is a Montessori school, so for elementary school age children, and potentially a new residence on the property as well, like a residential dwelling, single family dwelling. So currently the application sits at the zoning bylaw amendment phase. So that's where we are right now. The next stage of this will be that, should the zoning bylaw amendment be passed, then it would move to what's called a site plan control phase. So a site plan application would be submitted, and this site plan application will be in a fair amount of depth in terms of there's many stakeholders in the various departments in the city that are involved in that. Cultural heritage staff will be involved at that stage as well. And so will natural heritage staff, development engineering, urban design, and of course the building department as well. So at that site plan stage is the time where we have much more opportunity to get into the details of what will happen with the property. What I will say is the property will not be demolished. The building will not be demolished. So the owners recognize, and the entire team that's working on this project recognize the cultural heritage significance of the property. We agree. We absolutely agree with staff on the Waterdown Village inventory study. And so that is not in question of, that the building is going to disappear or that it's going to be taken too far beyond its current massing. What is going to happen to the building, what's proposed, is that it will turn into a school. So it won't be a dwelling anymore. However, nearly all of the existing, original footprint of the building will be retained as part of that redesign and reconfiguration to adaptively reuse the building to a Montessori school instead of it being a single family dwelling. So there is lots of opportunity. We're early in the game here, I would say, in that coming to staff. And I know this was I was working on this file actually with Miranda when she was at the city, so it's nice to see Miranda as well today. And now working with Chloe. So, like I say, we're early in the development of all of this plan. We are only at the zoning bylaw amendment stage, so it's a little early to kind of be getting into details. But what we do want to say is, yes, we recognize the property is of significance for many reasons. I'm not sure if everyone had a chance to read the report, but I think perhaps the most significant reason is that William Pierce Howland, who was what we refer to as one of the fathers of Confederation, actually owned the property. He was the second owner of the property. So, and he was actually one of the people that had gone to England to negotiate the terms of the British North America Act. So we would say that's very significant in itself. If it meant nothing else, it would, that is enough for us to say that for sure this property is significant. It's just right now it's a question of timing, where we are at in terms of the process. And we need to move the process along through the bylaw amendment, and then there'll be at the site plan control phase, there'll be a lot of opportunity for, again, we will be coming back to the Heritage Committee and through Cultural Heritage staff to look for recommendations, community input, and the property owners and the development team on this are extremely willing to do that. We value the input of the community. The school the owners have another school actually elsewhere in Waterdown, so they are well involved with the community. And I think that, there just is a huge opportunity as we move through the site plan control stage of the project.
Through the chair, may I ask another question, or is there a list?
We do have Lynn as our next speaker, so maybe
Okay,
if we
let
can, we'll
Lynn,
come back
no,
to
let Lynn go, and then, except mine was going to be a follow-up question, but that's okay.
Well, thank you, through the chair. And I guess I have to say I'm a little bit confused because from both policy and design and inventory and research, we didn't have a problem. We didn't have any issue with what is being proposed through this document. Certainly the changes to the primary building and the so-called garage and even the new residential dwelling, there are no issues. What we were questioning was the number of criteria that were said yes or no instead of yes. And I don't really understand why this would have an impact on the process as you've described it. We would just like to see more criteria evaluated on the design and physical under the regulation 906. I don't understand why this would have an impact on the future going through the zoning bylaws, the site plan application. It wouldn't change, I would think.
No. So through the chair, so what I was doing was actually setting the context of where we are right now in the development application. So in terms of the criteria, and I'm going to recall from memory here, that were asked about. So 906 gives us a yes or a no. It doesn't give us an opportunity to say that something maybe partially meets that. It's either yes or no. So when the comments came back through staff, that it had to be a yes or a no, then these particular criteria were reevaluated and felt where they rested. Was it closer to no or was it closer to yes? So it was either a yes or a no. So I guess really what I'm saying is it forced our hand to put it into a no category. And the bill, so I'll speak to a couple of them. In terms of high degree of craftsmanship, the building itself, it's not actually very well built. So it doesn't really display any type of a high degree of craftsmanship. And I've been through the building a number of times and looked at it in detail. So I wouldn't say that there is the high degree of craftsmanship. What I do say is that something like the staircase, that did require a high degree of craftsmanship to make that staircase. So that's why the staircase, and again, we did leave that in there as it does display that high degree of craftsmanship. The rest of the building typically doesn't. It's relatively typical. I think I'm trying to recall what some of the other criteria were that there was an issue with, and just look at my notes here. The landmark. So this isn't typically in a heritage evaluation when we look at what landmarks are. So we would consider something like the monument at Battlefield in Hamilton to be a landmark. Although this may be a landmark to the very local people, they may say, "Oh, that building's always been there, and we know it." And you're giving directions. Somebody might say, "Go past the house on whatever corner or something." We could all relate to that as maybe being a local or a personal landmark. But really, the definition with the landmark, it doesn't meet that. But that's not to say that it is not, an important building. So we're just trying to, go with what is standard heritage practice and what meets what. So it doesn't meet the craftsmanship, the high degree overall. and it doesn't meet the landmark criteria. But I think sort of going back and forth about the criteria that it meets, we're not diminishing the building by saying it, whether it does or it doesn't meet something. We're not saying that, you know, these particular attributes, there's a whole list of heritage attributes for the building, including the interiors. And again, there was mention of the interiors, but it doesn't, just because they are important, and it doesn't mean that they meet that criteria under the 906. So I'm not sure if that answers why they're not there, or why we've said yes or no to them.
Okay.
But that's our explanation.
No, thank you for explaining that, Kathy. No, and so those comments were sent back through the working group to or through staff to yourself. Janice, just going back, you were next on the list. Is your question
yes.
related? So we have before
Through the chair, Kathy has now answered my question, because that was my original question. Thank you very much, Kathy, for the clarification.
Sorry, Janice, I got a little off.
No, it's okay. I get it.
Okay. So Lynn, did you have a follow-up question?
No, thank you.
Okay. And then we have David. You have a question? Go ahead.
Yes, through the chair to Kathy. Is there a potential for preserving the Dunnington Grub Gardens that are on the site?
They're really, sorry, through the chair, the gardens don't really exist anymore. What we're sort of, I think, grasping a little bit in that we can see the outline, the driveway approach, and what have you. But what I will say is that the site plan, which was in the package with the chia, it is quite, certainly the layout and the approach to the site is quite similar to what would have been in the Dunnington Grub plan. So it's the overall layout of it is similar. And keeping in mind in terms of gardens, and I'm certainly not a landscape garden expert, but the property will be being used by young children. So I should imagine that you know, the topography of the property isn't going to change. So there's some great opportunities for the children to run and play on the way that it undulates the property. So you know, I'm not sure what you know, it'll be a playing area for the children outside. And
yes.
there is an opportunity through natural heritage. Sorry, David. There will be an opportunity through natural heritage, through the site plan control stage, in terms of looking at trees and, you know, retaining of trees on the property and what have you. That will, there'll be a full review of that.
Yes, as I say, when I said gardens, I'm speaking of design, of course, and that quite important to maintain those original features of design. You mentioned Battlefield House, of course, the Howard Grubb and Laurie Dunnington gardens at Battlefield House as well. They're a very well-known architectural firm, and Laurie Dunnington is Canada's first female landscape architect. So they are very important to our history, and designs are very important. Thank you, Kathy.
Ken, did you wish to comment?
Yes, through you, Madam Chair. As long as I want to make sure everyone else at the committee had an opportunity to ask questions of Kathy. Okay. I just wanted to give a little more context after our thank the working group for all their interest in this. We had a very interesting conversation on it on Monday, and I just wanted to give a little bit more direction in terms of, as Kathy was saying, that staff do have the ability through specific holding zones and site plan to ensure that the building features in the chia are achieved. and it seems that Kathy is and the applicant is agreeing to maintain to saving the building in those terms outlined in the CHIA, and to remind the group of our discussion about placing more and the meaning of and placing more projects on the designation work plan, given the amount that's there. So I would suggest that perhaps the committee suggest a recommendation to direct staff to implement the CHIA through zoning, through appropriate zoning and site plan tools to protect those features identified in the CHIA. Is that a motion that committee would consider?
Can we?
May I,
Can we?
through the chair, may I ask a question of Ken?
Go ahead.
Ken, how much? What what are my words? I'm struggling here to get my words out. You're saying that there are ways that we can ensure that the property is protected and all of these things can happen by the way of CHIA. So is there strength to this? Can this be changed as it goes along and gets developed? Is there, how do we ensure that that's going to happen? I think that's my question.
We would put a holding zone in place, the zoning that would require a conservation plan by the applicant that addresses those issues. And zoning would, and site plan and building would not be released until staff were satisfied with that conservation plan. Is one of the ways.
Yeah.
So that's those items, typically we can't, as we discussed on Monday, often with interior features, when a building is being adaptively reused, there's safety issues, the Part 11 building code issues about what can and cannot be saved. And having that discussion at this point in a rezoning is very difficult to do because we don't know the details. So a conservation plan would allow us to flush those out and do our best to save these while still keeping the building safe. And that really is the only way we can deal with interior features.
Thank you, Ken. Through the chair, if I might add, so when these applications for a development of a site, or there may be buildings on the site, or maybe there's not a building on the site, or whatever the case is, and there is what's called site plan control under the Planning Act, there are a number of conditions that go into the site plan control. So that's where I mentioned natural heritage. So there'll be development engineering. They'll be ensuring that there's the civil engineering and the infrastructure. Sometimes there's a road widening. There's all kinds of things that go into those site plan control approvals. So there's a list of conditions. Cultural heritage typically is in one of those lists of conditions on many properties. So, and that's where the opportunity exists for us to engage with, and I believe it's sort of a new department or new group in the planning department that have natural heritage, cultural heritage, and I believe urban design, if I'm correct, Ken, under one sort of team, which is a fantastic opportunity in Hamilton that we have now, because we have the right team there at the table, and they will be at the table through the site plan control stage. So things like another thing that was asked about was how things are going to connect to the building. They will be addressed through that whole process, and they will not receive their approval for site plan or their building permits until all of those things have been met, all those conditions.
So Ken, just while we're having discussion, and Janice, I see you want to ask a question. So there's two things. There's monitoring and controlling what work is being done to protect attributes of but there's also the designation of the property itself. If maybe we could just discuss that, where that sort of would be in the future for. And then Janice, we have you on the list.
Yes, through the chair. Kathy, I certainly do not doubt anything that you and your team do. So truly appreciate that. My comment probably is going to be directed to Ken, and it's just something that I feel is my role here. And that being, I really, it's really too bad that our work plan is out of control. But I just don't think that that is. If we really believe it should be designated, then I guess that's where I'm coming from. And the other thing is the watered down built heritage inventory that has just recently been completed. This particular property was identified as a significant built resource, which meant that it was on the list for designation. So I felt that in our discussion with the inventory and working group, and certainly what came forward from policy and design, and of course I respect their opinion, I thought we were in very good, our recommendation was a solid one. So that's my final comment. Thank you.
Through you, Madam Chair, I don't think we were, I think we generally, that's the direction the committee goes, and I don't think there's a question of not designating the building going forward. I think it's a matter of how best to protect interior features and other aspects outlined in the CHIA as the building goes through development. That's the question, and when the building gets designated specifically. So I think that's more of the issue here. I think in the long term, I'm not sure Stacy could speak on behalf of the applicant, but I think the long term plan would be to designate. We're just trying to deal with the making sure the application is doing our best to respect the heritage features identified in the short term during redevelopment.
Absolutely. So through the chair, yes, that's correct, Ken. It's it isn't really a question of whether the property should be designated. We understand that. It's a question of the timing. And what I would say is that this, the owners have had this property for some years now. They've been carrying it and caring for it. And there's a huge opportunity with this redevelopment of this property, particularly because it will become a school. And there will be, public open days and what have you. There's an opportunity here for the public to be able to learn from this property and enjoy this property that they wouldn't maybe otherwise have. So I think the educational component to it, when it is becoming a school, but also that there will be signage and the gardens is an opportunity right there. The actual building itself and the history of Waterdown, Smoky Hollow being right across the way there, and the industrialization of Waterdown. So I think the opportunity here on this property is huge, but what we have to do right now is shepherd it through its transition and manage the change that's happening to it. And we're just extremely fortunate that we have such a wonderful team here that are all in agreement to do that and actually see it as an opportunity. So it's really just a question of timing. It's not a case of whether it wouldn't be designated. It's just timing.
Graham, I see you have a question.
Yeah, it's just more of a comment. This to me feels like we're going to end up such as the Royal Connaught, where designation is going to happen, but it's not going to interfere with the process of what they want to do with the building right now. So with the site plan controls, keeping the heritage features there, hopefully, during the planning process, and when they're all done, then we go forward with designation. I don't really see it being much of a problem for anybody as long as everyone's aware of what's going to be happening.
Go ahead, Ken.
I suggest an amendment for the committee's consideration. Lorraine, hopefully you can get this. The committee would direct staff to implement the retention of the heritage of the exterior and interior heritage features of the building identified in the CHIA through a conservation and management plan and other appropriate planning tools, policies, and procedures through zoning and site plan. Steve, is that appropriate?
While we're waiting for Steve, is there any discussion on that proposed amendment?
Sorry, Steve just left the call for a minute, but.
Go ahead.
Sorry,
James.
my apologies, Madam Chairman
sorry.
and Committee. Ken, could you just sort of repeat the question or this comment? I just had to step out of my office for a second.
No problem. Lorraine, did you get what I said?
I did get most of it, Ken. Perhaps you'd like to tell it to us again?
That staff be directed to implement the conservation of exterior and interior heritage features identified in the CHIA through a conservation and management plan and appropriate planning policy and procedures through zoning and site plan.
So yes, sorry, that is something that we can achieve through the zoning, and I was just recalling, for example, when the rezoning application went forward last June for 1260 or 1269 Mohawk Road in Ancaster area, we built into the implementing zoning bylaw that the new planning permissions were directly linked to the preservation and retention of the existing heritage dwelling. And then I know part of the earlier conversation, I was just thinking on the cannot, there we did the designation after all of the works had been done. So there is always that opportunity at the end of the process. And years ago, 723 Rymal Road West, there's an existing heritage building on that property, and then they built the new care facility beside it. Both the official plan and the zoning bylaw linked the new planning permissions to the retention of that existing house in situ. So that's why the house is sort of, it's up on the knoll, because they had to do the grading changes. So that through the planning process, we can provide through the zoning bylaw in terms of how we recommend new permissions for the property, have a direct linkage to the existing dwelling. As Ken indicated, through the use of the holding provision, we can ensure that the implementation of the CHIA happens, whether that through the zoning stage and or any future site plan stage. And ultimately, in conversations with the owner, we can talk about the possibility of a designation at a future point in time. There are benefits, as we know, to the designation in terms of some either whether grants, DC relief, or other considerations. But that can happen after we've completed the work that has to be done dealing with the zoning issue. And then by continuing with this property on the registry, we also have that additional level of protection to ensure that it doesn't get demolished. And if there is a demolition permit submitted for whatever reason, we can always report back to committee and council with any recommended courses of action. So based on the course of action that Ken has outlined to the committee, we can provide for the adaptive reuse of this property while still ensuring that the heritage attributes and the protection of that heritage resources is addressed through the planning process. And we can report back to committee to show how we've been able to achieve that. Thank you.
Steve?
Janice, go ahead.
Yes, this is just a procedural question. What will happen now with the process? The inventory and research are recommending their recommendation. Now there is an amendment. How does that work? What are we going to do in order to determine what we're going to do and how we're going to vote? Thank you.
So I believe we would vote on the amendment first. We'll vote for the amendment with the changes, and then we can vote. And correct me if I'm wrong, Lorraine. Vote on what the are we actually voting for the recommendation that's before us as a no?
No.
So just amending.
Through the chair, I recommend that you vote on the amendment first. If it carries, you vote on the recommendation that is before you as amended. So the recommendation as it is before you, plus the amendment that you you may have just approved. If you do not approve the amendment, it is the recommendation that is before you in the working group notes.
I think Ken has a question.
I was just going to say through you, Madam Chair, I don't think these are at odds with each other. I think they support each other moving through. I don't know if the committee sees that differently.
So right now, the recommendation that is before us is recommending designation of the property. The amendment is looking to treat the property using the tools that are provided in the Planning Act and zoning, correct? Oh, but the amendment is not including designation.
If the amendment passes, through the chair, pardon me, through the chair, if the amendment passes, then it will be added to the working group recommendation. Consider it a part B if that makes it easier to imagine. If the amendment is not voted or is defeated, then it will be the recommendation that is already before you that came from the working group notes.
But Lorraine, I believe the amendment is actually, it's an outright change. It's not an addition to the.
Yes.
So
I see. Sorry, I did not catch that. I didn't catch staff saying that. So, okay.
So the recommendation from the working group is asking for it to be added to staff's work plan for designation.
So this is
This amendment we've just been discussing is to, rather than adding to staff's work plan for designation, would be to manage the heritage attributes through the development process using the tools that they have in the Planning Act.
My apologies, Madam Chair. I thought it was in addition to. I did not catch that detail.
So the question that does lead us is, do we need a line that says that staff should work with the owners to
I leave that with
for future
committee.
designation?
That is up to committee.
And the other item is if there's something happens with the property and there's an ownership change, do we need something in there that say staff would provide some would inform the committee if there is an ownership change or the project should change? Maybe through the staff, is there any additional verbiage that we can add to the amendment that we're discussing?
Seeing my WebEx here. I don't, that seems to make sense, Madam Chair, that if you wish to ask that staff would report back if there's a change in ownership of the building. And staff, the building is protected as it is on the register. So if something were to happen, that would return to the committee, and the committee would have the opportunity to issue a NOID at that point.
Do we have some comments or questions from members? If not, I think Lorraine needs for us to.
Graham's got his hand up.
Graham's waving his hands. Okay, go ahead, Graham. And just before Graham, before you talk, and then I think just through staff, we'll need to provide Lorraine with what exactly we want that recommendation to say as an amendment. Go ahead, Graham.
I was just thinking we could still leave it on the designation work plan with a low priority and move it forward after the work is completed, the same as we did with the Canot. So I think our recommendation from the working group can still come forward. Just we bring it forward with a recommendation of low priority on the work plan.
Steve, did you have
No, I was going to suggest maybe Ken could share the text of what he said. I think, or Chloe, I think they had been trying to write something. And then with, I understand, maybe we can add the one element you said to monitor and report back in the event there's a change in ownership or a change in the development proposal. And the comment that Graham made about putting it on with a note in terms of keeping it on the work plan for consideration for designation, giving it a low priority, but there be a direction to staff that reason why it's being assigned to low priority is until such time as the development concept has been executed, and then to report back at that time. So we can try to craft some of that language and just share it with people. I know it's often difficult to remember everything, just so that the committee members have a comfort level as to what the proposed text is. So I don't know if either Ken or Chloe have something that, so if you just give us a minute to put on the share with the committee members, and then we would need a member to move the amendment, and if there's no one willing to move the amendment, then it would be taking a vote on the recommendation as coming out of the inventory research subcommittee.
So I guess in essence, we can keep the working group's recommendation, but add in low priority. And then
correct.
Lorraine, as you had suggested, add as a part B is the additional amendments to the.
Essentially, we'd be providing a direction on when to look to put this on the work plan for doing the designation. Because if I recall correctly, Connaught took several years before we were able to move it forward with the designation. So it may take a couple of years until we're at a point to start looking at this for a designation perspective. Sorry.
Okay, this is going to take a little bit to put all together here, guys. Sorry about
Sorry,
that.
ma'am. I appreciate everyone's indulgence and patience with us, but sometimes
we just like to put Ken on the spot.
I know Ken is now scribing. I appreciate it. I mean, it's important that we get it right and that the members have a comfort level that they are aware of what they're voting on, and that everyone has a clear understanding, so that we don't wake up tomorrow morning with buyer's regret.
Yeah. Exactly. Through the chair, thank you very much. I do agree that all details are very important. And this feels better. Thank you very much.
Sorry, we don't normally like to do this, but on the fly, I know it's very difficult, but sometimes it's worth just.
So what I could do, actually, what we could do, just as well, Ken sort of getting the words together, we can vote on the delegate, and get so thank you, Kathy, for all of the commentary and the answering all those questions that we had. I think overall the working group was excited to see what's going to be happening with the property, and that's going to be great for the community. There was actually some discussion over whether it was a landmark property and just how important it is for the community. So I think it's great that it's going to have a use and it's going to be something important. So we have our delegate, Kathy Stacey.
Lynn has something.
No, it was just kind of an offside comment to Kathy, and I think that Stacey maybe forwarded on to you the fact that there used to be a large swimming pool on the property, and when I'm looking in the CHIA on page 12, the photograph actually shows the swimming pool, and I think it's going to be the exact location of the proposed new dwelling. So that's just an aside.
To the chair, yes, and thank you. And through the chair, thank you to Lynn as well, because she was very invaluable to us with the research of the property and what have you. So it's and great to have all the comments from inventory and research and policy and design as well. And we'll be back for more input. And thank you to everyone.
So may I have a mover and a seconder to receive the delegation?
I see Janice and I see Graham.
Okay. And as we move to vote on the delegation, do we have any opposed? Okay, thank you. That item's carried. And how are you doing, Ken?
Oh, slow but sure. Hold on a second. Lorraine could send me what I said. That would be helpful.
Madam Chairman, the other option is, Ken and Chloe work on their wordsmithing. You may want to just defer consideration of this matter, move on to the other items of the agenda. We can always come back to the at the end of the meeting, dealing with 10.1 and 10.2 to avoid any delays in people's time while planning and clerk staff sort out the wording, and then we can have something to share with the committee members after we deal with the other business items. Just a suggestion.
Okay, that's
Through the chair, we have already approved 10.1. We are now on 10.2.
So we can just defer 10.2 until after we've dealt with 11, 12, and 13 would be my suggestion. Is that okay, clerks?
Yes, but I will have something to add to that once we have approved the motion to defer the item until after some discussion.
I will hand it back to you. Thank you.
So, Madam Chair, we will need a motion to defer approval of the report until after, let's call it before item 13.1.
Sounds good. So that is the motion. Do we have a mover and a seconder?
I see Tim and I see David.
And as we move to vote, is there anyone opposed? Okay, that's great. All right, so we will come back to that item. And we will now move on to our general information and other business. So at this time, we will discuss our list of buildings and landscape. And if there's any additions to the list, if you can just please let me know the update in the property address, we will get that added, as well as if there's any removal. So maybe what we'll do is we'll go by person. By show of hands, do we have any members that would like to report on a property? So we have David. Tim, Chuck. Any other updates? No? Okay, so go ahead, Tim. If you could just let us know which item number it is in the property, then. Go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, it's two items: the knitting mill and the I don't have it in front of me, and the big exciting one is the Tivoli today. Are my two property updates. I don't know if I'm getting through or not. I'm having some.
we can hear you and see you. Yep.
You hear me? Okay. Okay, that's great. It's just not getting back to me. So I want to thank Janice for coordinating this. The three amigos of great heritage preservation, Diane Dent, Janice Brown, and Carol Priamo, have all teamed up to make contact with Chris Milnerick, who is the Chief Financial Officer with Adventus Development. And they have just, we saw it in the CBC article, but we knew this earlier thanks to my connection with the three amigos. And so we're going to... they're looking to really kind of get involved with local heritage architects and things with the Tivoli development. They've also bought, I believe, that 4 Points thing at the corner, which isn't really heritage, but it's all part of this larger plan. So it will be interesting. I don't know if we're at the stage yet where we're pre-ordering our floor seats for the next performance at Tivoli. But it's a positive thing that anything has come forward, and that they're looking forward to engaging with historic things from Adventus. So it's pretty exciting news on the Tivoli. I double checked it too. It wasn't an April Fool's joke. There really is something happening at the Tivoli site today. So happy for that. And just on my second property, the Cannon Knitting Mill, not nearly as thrilling. March 6th, and then yesterday, I was almost struck by debris that blew off the top of the building, a giant piece of metal from the capping. And the other day, one struck a motorist on the street, and they stopped on March 6th. Both of those incidents have been reported to Bylaw. And yesterday I heard from the owner of the site, Harry Stinson, who has assured me that the crew is going to be securing this against further issues on the top of the mill. But aside from that, that's about the... that's not nearly as exciting as it is that Tivoli information of nearly being decapitated by flying debris off a site we're watching. But yeah, remains to be seen at that one. So that's it for me.
Well, we're glad you're okay, Tim. You didn't get hurt. David, you're next on our list.
Yes, thank you, through the chair. I'm looking at 13.1B, and it's the Boulevard Heritage District. We met with the forestry recently, and we have set out the for the trees once again for the spring planting, and everything's looking very positive there. I will ask if there is someone on staff who can help us with an issue. A couple days ago, our heritage plaque and wall has been heavily covered with paint. We can take this off, but this is beyond our ability to do so. There's going to pressure washing or something here, and so I'm hoping that maybe after the meeting someone can contact me and I can set with whoever looks after this at the city to get this paint off of there. As I say, it's very extensive, and there seems to be a new purple paint around the east end of the city here, and so I think there's going to be a bit more of it around. But that's all I have to report today. Thank you.
Thank you, David. So maybe if there can be some follow-up with staff just to help you out there, David. We've got Chuck is next on our list.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to update two of the properties that I'm responsible for in Ancaster. The first one's 13.1 D, and that's the properties at 442, 450, 452 Wilson Street East in Ancaster. These are the properties right next door to the old Brandon house, and as context, obviously there's tons going on in this area with the planning committee and city council. I don't want to talk about that. I more want to focus in on what's happening going forward. There was a deferral of the decision that city council negotiated deferral of the decision, and part of that deferral was to have community engagement. So in April, there's a community information meeting regarding those three properties plus the old Brandon house, and that's Wednesday, April the 20th, from 6:30 to 8:30 at the Ancaster Old Town Hall in 310 Wilson Street East. I'm sure beyond that it'll be back again before planning and others have more knowledge about what's going to happen there, and then via city council. So if there is the public at large listening to this and they have any opinion, as I said, there's an upcoming community information meeting about the properties at 442, 450, 452 Wilson Street plus the Brandon House property. So that's the first thing. So the second item is, again, it's related to the Mar Filippo building. And again, I don't want to talk about all the stuff all the interesting stuff that's going on with planning and such. And there's people on this who are more familiar with it. I understand there's an opportunity to provide input for the public at large no later than April the 4th, if you have an opinion and if you have thoughts on that property. So again, this is the property near Wilson and Academy, and that's it right now. Beyond that, there's been no other changes in the properties I'm responsible for.
Thank you, Chuck. And lastly, we have Graham.
Okay, nothing new. Mr. Report on my existing buildings, but before the meeting, Will and I were talking about Philpott Memorial Church and how it's been sold. So it looks like the building is going to be extremely threatened. I don't see him in the room anymore, so he was going to bring it forward that we add Philpott Memorial Church to the list, and I would assume in around about the yellow category. That's at 84 York Boulevard. And seeing as I'm watching just down the street the Copley Noise building, I can add this to my list and keep an eye on it as well.
Okay, thank you, Graham. So we would need a motion to add that to our list.
Yeah.
Do we have a seconder?
Through the chair, may I have the address of that property again? I'm sorry, I missed it.
84 York Boulevard.
Thank you.
Well.
Okay, and I think we had Chuck, Janice, and Tim as seconders, so you can pick one. So as we vote, is there anyone opposed to adding that to our list? Seeing none, that item is carried. Do we have any other updates before we vote for the whole list? If not, may I have a motion to receive all of those updates? So Lorraine, there was Tim and Graham.
Thank you.
Okay. And as we vote, is there anyone opposed? Seeing none, that item is carried. So we can now go back to our item, what was that, 10?
That would be 10.2, Madam Chair.
So for 10.2, so in the chat, Lorraine has posted here that the Inventory and Research Working Group recommends that 265 Mill Street South, Flamborough, Waterdown, be added to staff's work plan for heritage designation under the Ontario Heritage Act as a low priority for analysis and supporting documentation. And to see the recommendation notes that staff be directed to implement the conversation of internal and external heritage features of the building identified in the CHIA through a conservation plan. Sorry there for a second. That staff be directed to implement the conservation internal and external heritage features of the building identified in the CHIA through a conservation plan and employing appropriate zoning and site plan policies, procedures, and processes. That the property be designated when construction is completed. So,
Madam Chair, my apologies. That is the wrong amendment. Staff have sent me a second one. Ken, I believe you're muted, so if you wish to speak, can you turn on your microphone, please?
I'm
Can you please ask staff to make it very clear what the amendment is before the committee today?
Through you, Madam Chair, I'm comfortable with that first amendment. Let's just work with this one that's here. I apologize. We have numerous staff with different things flying around. So I would just ask Steve to take one last look and make sure there's nothing in there that's problematic from his experience with this. And if he's fine with it, then I suggest committee deliberate and vote on that recommendation, the recommendation that the chair has just read. Again, my apologies to all for the confusion around this.
Madam Chairman, I am comfortable with the wording that Ken has provided, and it achieves the intent of what we are trying to achieve here on this property. Thank you.
Oh, so we're what I had read, not the secondary amendment. Okay. Okay. So that is before us. Is there any comments or questions from the group? So Lorraine, we're going to be voting on this amendment. Do you need, and you won't need any secondary voting?
No, I believe we're all clear now. I just need a mover and seconder, please.
All right.
At my choice. Tim and Janice.
Sounds good. And as we move to vote, is there anyone opposed? Seeing none, that item is carried as amended. Thank you, everyone. Got that taken care of. All right. So we now move on to our just adjournment, which is good. But is there any new business?
Madam Chair?
Yep.
Pardon the interruption.
Sorry, no problem.
Staff have advised that item 7. Sorry. Second, please. It's staff, sorry, it was consent item 7.4, the recommendation to remove 8 Renwood Place, Flamborough from the Municipal Heritage Register. My apologies, that report has recommendations and the committee has only received the item. I realize that it might seem like a game of semantics, but for everyone involved, I would ask for 2 things. If we could have a reconsideration vote to put the recommendation report back on the table, and then look at the recommendations of the report and vote accordingly. I can put the recommendations into the chat so that everyone can see them.
Sounds good. And Lauren, could you just repeat the item number so we have it?
7.4 under consent.
Okay. So again, 7.4 is the recommendation to remove 8 Wrenwood Place, Flamborough from the Municipal Heritage Register, PED 21201C in Ward 15. And we'll let Lorraine get those recommendations up into the chat for us. So A and B, that council receive the notice of objection attached as Appendix A to report PED 21201C for the owner of 8 Wrenwood Place, Flamborough, objecting to the notices of council's decision to list the non-designated property on the Municipal Heritage Register under Section 27 of the Ontario Heritage Act, and that council remove 8 Wrenwood Place, Flamborough from the Municipal Register pursuant to Section 27 8 of the Ontario Heritage Act. Okay, so so that recommendation is before us. Do we have a mover? Oh, pardon.
Madam Chair, it's the reconsideration of it first, so that's a housekeeping motion. If I could get a mover and a seconder to approve the reconsideration. Seeing Graham and Janice.
And anyone opposed to the reconsideration? David, could you please put your hand down if you're not opposed? Oh, he's frozen in time there. Is there anyone opposed to reconsidering? Seeing none, we will now vote on the recommendation that's before us. Do we have a mover and a seconder? Tim and David. And is there anyone opposed to that as we vote? Seeing none, that item is carried.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
No problem. And does that clean everything up, Lorraine? Is there any other things we need to address before we go to our new business?
No, I believe that is the last item.
Okay. That's perfect. And Janice, are you going to be talking to us about Doors Open? Because I think our next, just for business, our next meeting, unless we hear otherwise, will be May 13th, 2022 at 9:30. Go ahead, Janice. Oh, Janice, I think you're on mute.
Okay, I'm now free. I have 2 notices, and I know Karen is away on holiday because we were chatting about something. So I had just seen either in the paper or on Facebook, there is a huge celebration. Dundas is celebrating 175 years, and the Dundas Museum and Archives has a great little program going on. And what they're doing is they're asking their folks that live in Dundas to tell them what the community of Dundas means to them, and they submit this through 100 words, and it's going to be part of an ongoing exhibit that they've got at the museum. So that hopefully will still be around when we have our doors open. And that is my second comment. Doors Open Hamilton. It will be in person this year. It is May the 7th and 8th, and it is being run by the Architectural Conservancy of Ontario, the Hamilton Region Branch, and we have 26 properties, in-person sites, and we have over 8 walking tours and other events that are part of this event. So for a very small group of dedicated volunteers, this will go, and it's the first time since 2019, and it's been very difficult, needless to say the least, and challenging because we are so small. So having said that, if you have some free time on either the Saturday, May the 7th, or the Sunday, May the 8th, I am still looking for volunteers. Yesterday, I need approximately 50 volunteers to act as site ambassadors. And yesterday, I think I was up to 30. So if you could spare 3 hours, you just have to be a greeter, just like Walmart. If you know more about the site, that would be wonderful. But our in-person sites have their own folks looking after, I think, most of the places that we will be visiting. And the good thing is there are a couple new sites that haven't been on before, and one that I do want to mention, maybe it's been on, but I don't know. We know that the Copley is under new ownership, and we do have the Copley on, and I've been told we've got the courtyard, and I've never been in that courtyard. I've only seen pictures. And the other thing is there's a really good possibility that we're going to be able to get into parts of the building. They are under renovation, so it is really dependent. So keep your fingers crossed that we can get into that one. I'm really excited about seeing that. We had Philpott on, by the way, folks, and they never got back to us. They said yes, they do it from Sunday to 1 to 5, or 1 to 4. I'm very disappointed that they didn't get back to us because I don't know what's going to happen to Philpott. So having said that, please volunteer again. I know we're all volunteers here, but or if you know of people, if you've got friends that have high school students, willing to have them along as well. And the only other thing that you would have to do is attend an orientation session that I promise you will not be onerous. It will be a nice event for you. So, and that's from 6 to 8 at the Lister. So that's the volunteer aspect of it. Thank you very much.
And just tying in with that, we're as the Municipal Heritage Committee, we're also going to have a presentation
thank you.
at the Lister block. So and that'll be both days, the Saturday and the Sunday. So if we have any of our own members that are able to volunteer, even if it's just for a couple of hours, just to be there and answer any questions from people that may come into the tourism office and Lister, we could use your help there. So, so thank you, Janice. And is there any other new business? If not, I think we can adjourn for today.
Thank you.
I need a mover and a seconder.
I see Tim and I see Chuck.
I had a quick question, actually.
Oh, holding up the meeting.
It was just in regards to a bunch of emails we got regarding code of conduct training. I was just wondering on further clarification of when that.
Tim, can we take this offline, please?
Oh, certainly, yeah, no problem.
Thank you.
Yep. And that's for all groups. Just Lorraine, just to clarify, that's for all the working group or committees and groups across the city, right? Oh, and David, you are on the list. Go ahead, David.
A date for the next meeting?
May 3rd, tentatively, it's May 13th, 2022.
Okay.
9:30. I say unless we have to have another meeting in between because of the previous discussions that we had, but May 13th. Okay.
May 13th.
So we had our mover and a seconder, and now as we vote to adjourn, do we have anyone opposed to that? Seeing none, the item is carried. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day, and we'll see you all soon.